Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Omobola Stephen, your host on the live on I will lead Omobola Stephen, a personal development and self-improvement podcast, which occasions expert and professionals who have the right information to share with the audience of Omobola Stephen in order to move them from where they used to be to where they need to be. Now, you need to understand that personal development is a lifelong process and is something we need to embrace and work on in order to become better and become who life has truly meant us to be. Today, I have Clarkisha Kent, I beg your pardon, on the show with me. Now, Clarkisha is a seasoned culture critic. She's also a former columnist and an author. Hi, Clarkisha. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you doing? Omobola.
I'm doing just great. Excited to have you on the show. Looking forward to an incredible time with you because you've got a lot to share with my audience. And I do know they're going to have a great time indeed. Now, I also like the audience of Omobola Stephen to let you know that Clarkisha is a first generation Nigerian American. Now, that's good to know.
Yes, I am.
All right, Clarkisha, your story of abuse, of healing, redemption, and the quest for self-esteem is quite interesting. I'd like you to tell them about it.
So, basically, it's not a unique journey because I don't want to be like, oh, I'm the only one who's ever gone through this. I'm not. But my journey personally kind of starts and continues with the fact that, like you mentioned, I'm a first generation Nigerian American child. You know, my parents did come to America to find new avenues for life because of what was going on back home. Because people my age kind of forget about the Civil War that broke out. So that was part of what happened as well. So they came here trying to find a new life. You know, I feel like, I guess the trauma they went through that, and I guess their own families kind of bled into their life here. But rather than, like you mentioned on our off talk, working through that and healing, they kind of just passed it on to, me and my other siblings and kind of took it out on us, right? So that's kind of why I'm here now, because I had to personally heal from that. I couldn't use them as an excuse to keep walking around unhealed and just being terrible to other people. So basically my healing work brought me to writing. And then that's how I'm here now, because I just kept writing and working through my healing journey and the trauma that happened to me. And that has allowed me to kind of, turn it into this book, to turn it to all the articles and criticisms that I've written thus far. So that's kind of the root of everything.
Awesome. Now, in your words, and I quote, in the face of body dysmorphia, homophobia, anti-Blackness, and respectability politics, the pursuit of high self-esteem seemed oxymoronic. Clarkisha, I'd like you to crack the nut for my audience.
So you want me to elaborate on that? So basically, what I meant by that particular statement is that there's a lot of, when you're a Black woman in particular, I can't speak for anyone else, and I'm not even speaking for all Black women, right? But when you're a Black woman, there's so many forces working against you, the ones that I named, right? So body dysmorphia, obviously there's a fully fledged medical definition for it. But my understanding and what I've gone through is the fact that sometimes you just really don't know how you look like. The phone camera tells you something different. The mirror tells you something different. You think something different. So because you don't have any idea of what you actually look like, right? It can exacerbate any other existing self-esteem issues, right? Colorism, misogyny, all the things I mentioned, very oppressive forces in terms of restricting our self-development, restricting our self-expression. It can get pretty bad. And like I mentioned, it kind of makes the journey for us building self-esteem really almost nearly impossible. Because I know people emphasize the self and self-esteem, but if society keeps chipping away at what you keep building, right, then you're not going to have any self-esteem because it keeps essentially getting knocked down. So that's what I was kind of alluding to when I wrote that sentence. The odds are kind of stacked against us, right? But we have to keep moving anyway.
Well, absolutely. Now you emphasize self-esteem, and now this is very important, in order to have, even healthy relationships, right? So how have you been able to handle self-esteem in this regard?
So a lot of it was trying to sort through the noise, and make sure that all of these societal voices or forces that I'm referring to aren't internalized, right? Because somebody can say whatever about me. I guess that's their right? Unless they're like lying on me or slandering me, then that's a separate issue. But they can say whatever, right? But at the end of the day, that's not my issue. Their voice should not be the one in my head that's telling me what to do, how to feel about myself, right? So the goal for me is always to not internalize whatever is going on around me. And by making sure that I don't do that, it helps me, like I mentioned, build that self-esteem that people try to like tear at or tear down.
Right now, I'd like us to go further in this conversation. Now, let's talk about respectability in politics in the context of Black womanhood. Now, the school of thought are of the belief that behaving or appearing like the dominant group in society will deem you more respect, right, and more value. I'd like you to tell me, and also the audience of Like We All Live, has this ever worked for you and to the Black woman out there?
Great question. It's never personally worked for me. Every time I try to, like you said, emulate, for example, like a white American person, whether through speech, whether through clothing, whether through certain mannerisms, it never works out, right? Because at the end of the day, I am still a Black woman. That is still what they see, and they're going to regard me as such. So there's only so much I can do to modify my behavior to change that perception. So yeah, at the end of the day, I decided after a couple of years of trying that I'm just going to do me. Now that could be a little difficult when, the people around you, your community still buys into that. That's where a lot of like the intercommunity friction comes from. But as you mentioned, it's never worked out for me personally. So that's why I always am, I just reject it because it doesn't work.
Right. Thank you once again, Clarkisha, for that insight. Now, I'm talking about this body dysmorphic disorder, right? Research has said that it has a cure, right? No, it has a treatment, but it cannot be cured. How have you been able to handle this traumatic experience?
Lots and lots and lots of therapy. There's a reason I wish it were free for everybody. It should be free, as all healthcare should be free. But therapy is so helpful because sometimes you really need that third party that literally has no idea who you are, what you've been through, right? So some of those biases, for the most part, aren't there, right? Because, you can still be biased as a therapist. I've had a couple, when trying to find my perfect one, I've had a couple of them who just were not good. I've went through some not good therapists. So I really empathize with people who meet one and they're like, I don't want to do it anymore, because it can be tough. But yeah, therapy was very helpful because I really got to sort through everything, and also identify the source, which was why I was able to basically trace it back to my parents, but not just them, even the journey that preceded them. So once I identified that source, I was able to kind of like identify all my issues that branched off from there. So therapy, right. A lot of therapy.
Sure. Now, one of your topics, you mentioned intergenerational trauma that you've been through. Clarkisha, you've been through a lot, but I'm glad that you're still able to stand. And that's the beauty of life. You fall, you rise again and keep going forward. Right. Now, for every single person you meet, it's repeating cycles of generational trauma or carrying the burden of breaking cycles. These are the two schools that we have, and two individuals that we have in the society. You're trying to break the cycle, or you're carrying the burden. Now,
Yes.
I know that you've faced myriads of intergenerational trauma. How have you been able to break the cycle? Right? Has it been easy, or what phase are you right now?
Definitely in the breaking the cycle phase. It's hard to be that person who's breaking it rather than perpetuating it, because it's very alienating. At this point in time, I am no longer talking to any of my family. Initially, I tried to take them on that journey. I really did, and I tried to talk with them about this stuff, as you mentioned, like just not a little of the trauma that I went through, like the whole collective family trauma. I tried to address it. And, my parents in particular, they were like those parents who are very set in their ways. They didn't want to learn the new terminology. They didn't want to, like you mentioned, learn the new school of thought. Everything to them was very like, oh, that's like super Americanized. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, what about good mental health is Americanized? Like, you should want that, period. That has nothing to do with this particular country, right? You having healthy mental health has everything to do with you. But yeah, they didn't want to come on that journey, unfortunately. So I had to leave them behind. So since then, it's been me trying to reconcile the fact that, not everybody's going to come with you on that journey to break that cycle. Some people are, in fact, there. It's a sad truth. Some people are, in fact, there to perpetuate it. So when you are kind of called personally, spiritually, whatever you worship, to break it, like, you really do have to answer that call, but also keep in mind that it can be at times very, very lonely.
Absolutely. Very lonely, as I said. Very important to always try to, personally develop ourselves and find ways of improving ourselves.
Yes.
Right. It's a tough work, but it's what they have for at the end of the day. Clarkisha, you writing a memo, and I want you to tell my audience what inspired the new memo that's on the blog that you write in fact of pattern of Big Beach Manifesto. Now that's some big headline. What's what's the story about, and what's the takeaway?
Yes, ma'am. So the story is about how fat phobia kind of affects every area of life. When you talk about fat phobia, fatness, whatever, people have this one image in their mind. Oh, it's like, oh, someone's making fun of you being fat, or, like certain media portrayals of how fat people are, which is like sloppy, apparently, unintelligent, dirty, et cetera, et cetera. So the point of my book is to illustrate the fact that it is really beyond that. Like, people have a really elementary understanding of fat phobia, and it stretches way beyond that. Like, fat phobia is the reason that airline seats are so skinny. Like, you try to sit down on an airplane, you can't move. It's so skinny. Fat phobia is responsible for fat people not getting promoted as much. Fat phobia is responsible for us not being able to find clothes. Like, I could really keep going on and on, but I thought that it'd be wise to tell my personal story to kind of spell all that out. Because sometimes when people are dictating to you and throwing definitions at you, it doesn't stick. But when you have like a story, right, an anecdote that also kind of highlights the issues I mentioned, then you're like, oh, so this happens more often than I thought it did. So that's kind of my goal with that, like giving people a story to like identify all the issues that I bring up. So that was my inspiration. And shout out to my agent, Clara Draper. They're actually the one who came up with the subtitle, which is a Big Bitch Manifesto. So it's very punchy, and caught the eyes of my publisher immediately, because we were trying to shorten my original subtitle, which was much longer, but yeah.
Awesome. Now we're looking forward to that project and wish you best of luck in that. All right. Clarkisha, aside your book and project, do you have any interesting news you'd like to share with my audience?
Great question. So I do have a media test called the Kent test. It's actually on my website, www.clarkishakent.com. So with the media test, kind of like in alignment with my book, I use certain media questions to analyze like film, TV, whatever have you, and kind of see if the representation for Black women and or other women of color is thoughtful. There's so many tropes and stereotypes that they put of us in the media, which, you know, it goes beyond like being offensive. It's actually just quite lazy and reductive of us as people, right? And I know some people think it's not a serious thing, but like I talk about in my book, like at the beginning, a lot of people take their understanding of other people from these TV shows, from these films, and they stop right there. They don't educate themselves further. They're just like, oh, because I saw a Black woman, I don't know, doing this and that in the movie, they all do this and that apparently in real life. And that's not true, obviously. But again, people don't want to kind of push themselves to learn beyond that. So I came up with a test to highlight all those things. Okay, so these are the common stereotypes people put out about us. This is the role that they make us play in other people's stories, right? They really treat us like side characters in their lives. And it's very funny because it kind of highlights their own main character syndrome. Like they're the only people that exist on this planet, right? So there's more to that test, but basically it was me highlighting really problematic portrayals of us in the media that people kind of put in as like surface level diversity and inclusion. So since I've actually created the test, I've had like people like professors and students, entertainers, a lot of people contact me like, wow, like I didn't know it was this bad. And I'm like, yeah, because some of y'all aren't taught to be critical of what you're consuming. But yeah, that's kind of the idea about it. I created it back in 2018. And it's one of kind of the favorite things I've done because even now I am still learning from that test as I go through my own media or even my peers' media.
Awesome. That's a brilliant project you have, Clarkisha. Wish you best of luck once again in that and in all the subsequent projects you embark upon. So do you have any parting words you'd like to share with my audience? And don't forget to share your social media and also your website.
Yes, ma'am. So my social media is at Clarkisha Kent on Instagram. On Twitter, I am at iWriteAllDay_. I also have a Hive account where once again I am Clarkisha Kent. My website is www.clarkishakent.com. So you can actually go on there and find all the information I mentioned, including links to my books, my previous articles and work, and then the test that I mentioned as well.
Thank you once again, Clarkisha Kent, for your insight and also sharing your personal life experience with the audience of Omobola Stephen. Wish you best of luck once again on your project. Now, Clarkisha Kent is a seasoned culture critic, a former columnist and an author. I wish you best of luck once again going forward.
Thank you.
Now, if you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of the show, you can do so on any podcast cross-promotion platforms or podcast distribution platforms you bump into online and do have what we're listing the experience as you do so. Or you was asking yourself, I like to be on this show. I like to share my own personal life experience, focusing on personal development and self-improvement, or my expertise in these topics. You can mail me at omobolastephen@outlook.com. Or you can also get to know much about me and what I do on my website, www.omobolastephen.com. And I'll be looking forward to your mail. We can have a great show together, I promise you, and be the change that the world is waiting for. I need you to be good. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.